Hi, welcome to Smeester's Corner. My name is Adam Smeester, or as my students call me, Mr. Smeester. Today, we're going to discuss how maybe the ways that you think may be holding you back. So everything that I'm going to talk about today comes from Jonathan Haidt's book, The Coddling of the American Mind. There's a chapter in which he mentions a lot of this stuff. So, we're going to be talking about thought patterns. In life, a lot of your mental stability is determined on your thought patterns, the way that you have conditioned yourself to think, and the ways in which you think. There are patterns to them. Some therapists train people to identify the thought patterns that they have. If they have negative thought patterns, they try to break those thought patterns. Okay? Changing your thought patterns can do a lot for people. It can reduce your stress. It can help you deal with grief better. It can help you deal with complicated relationships and how you behave and think in those complicated relationships. Your thoughts will inevitably influence your behavior. So if you have negative thoughts and they're a distortion of the way the reality works, your thoughts can be affecting you negatively and holding you back, affecting your behavior. So what cognitive behavioral therapists try to do is get you to identify the thought patterns that you have. And when you see a negative thought pattern influencing you in a negative way that doesn't represent reality, causing you to make bad decisions, you try to break the pattern. So there are 8 negative thought patterns, or cognitive distortions as they're called. Cognitive because the way you're thinking, and distortion because it's not an accurate representation of reality. This causes you to make bad decisions and feel bad. Okay, so I'm going to go over 8 of them. The first one is called catastrophizing, or catastrophic thinking. This is when you constantly go to the worst case scenario in any situation. So maybe you say, oh my gosh, if I don't get a good grade on this test, that's going to sink my GPA. And if I don't get a good GPA, I won't get into a good college. And you just go down this little trail. Now, at the time, you think that this is a decent way of thinking. You think that, well, what if though? Like I should be concerned about that. Well, yeah, but you don't need to catastrophize it the way you do all the time. Here's some other examples. If my partner leaves me, then I'll be alone. And if I'm alone, I won't be able to handle this and that, or I won't be able to find anybody again. Sometimes you see this in social issues like global warming, and people think, well, if we don't get a grip on this, then the world's going to end in 12 years. And if the world's going to end, there's no point in having any kids. And they catastrophize. You can also see this on college campuses where people think, oh, if so-and-so speaks, then all the Nazis are going to come out on campus. It's going to ruin our campus life. Okay, so that's called catastrophizing. When you find yourself doing that, you got to mentally slap yourself in the face, even if you think that it's a legitimate thought, and you got to tell yourself to knock it off. Okay, I've had to do that myself, and I just have to say, all right, stop storytelling, stop catastrophizing, knock it off. Okay, I used to do that with my relationship with my wife when we were dating. Just think, are we having fun? Oh my gosh, are we having fun? Well, what if we're not having fun? What if that means we shouldn't be together? And if we shouldn't be together, what if we're just wasting a bunch of time? And I would start catastrophizing and analyzing the relationship instead of just being in the relationship and enjoying life. The second cognitive distortion is called dualistic thinking. This is when you think in terms of us versus them, black and white. There is no gray, there is no nuance. Either you're with us or you're against us. Okay, this happens all the time in politics. First of all, this is too overly simplistic. Okay, life is not just black and white. There are all sorts of shades of gray. And if you're trying to cast people in groups, that leads to prejudiced thinking. This type of thinking is a lower level of executive function, which means if you're thinking like this, your IQ is going down. Okay, you are not thinking accurately here. Okay, you're oversimplifying things. Here's some examples. If you vote for so-and-so, then you're and you just fill in the blank. A socialist, a racist, I tell my students all the time, it's not what side you fall on, it's why. So you can't be generalizing people like that all the time. Here's another one. I think X, and if you disagree with X, then you're not a moral person. And if you're not a moral person and these people gain power, then they're gonna ruin the country. Okay, that's dualistic thinking. A lot of people who use dualistic thinking live in silos, which means they only hear their own voice echoed back to them all the time. They usually aren't friends with people with whom they disagree because They think the other side is so terrible. When you do that, that just leads to more dualistic thinking, and you distort reality even more, because what you think the other side thinks, they probably don't actually think that. You think they do, and you think that there's a good reason to think that way, but when you find yourself doing that, you got to knock it off. The third one is called overgeneralizing, and this is when you just generalize about things all the time. So you say, oh, I always do this, or they always do that, or conservatives are always these kinds of people, liberals are always these kinds of people, or they always do this. People who are really hard on themselves often do this, and they say, oh, I'm just this kind of person. I didn't get the job. I never get the job. Oh, that person didn't want to go out with me. That always happens to me. No one ever wants to date me. I'm always the loser. I'm always this. And they're just always overgeneralizing. When you overgeneralize, by definition, you're not being accurate with how the world works and what is actually happening. If you're not accurate in that, you're going to make errors in judgment. Your behavior is going to be an error in judgment. And it's going to lead to emotional distress all the time. You're going to just feel bad. Okay? Allow yourself to feel good. Try to look for specifics. The fourth one is called discounting the positive. This is when all you're focused on is negativity, and you overlook any positive aspects that a person or a situation might have. So maybe you overlook your achievements a lot. Maybe you think, oh, yeah, I'm nice and I'm smart, but I'm really ugly, and that's what you try to focus on all the time. Or in sports, you won, but you tell yourself, oh, I only scored 15 points in a game. I should have scored 25, and you're just down on yourself all the time. You see this in school when people focus on countries, entire countries, entire groups of people, or historical figures, and they only look at the negatives. They never look at the positives, and all the negatives, any negative outweighs any positive that they've ever done. Okay, there are costs and benefits. There are good things and bad things, and you kind of have to weigh them. Maybe you look at a certain belief system and you think, oh, there's nothing good about that belief system. Okay, well, there are probably some positive aspects of that belief system. Okay, but you overlook it all the time. So you're not looking at things in a rational way. You're discounting things that should be accounted for. This type of thinking will steal your happiness because you're only focused on the negative. You can't be happy thinking like this all the time. You can't. Number 5 is called should statements, where you're only focused on not what is, but what should be. So you tell yourself, like if you're a student, oh, I shouldn't have to encounter that. I shouldn't have to listen to that. I shouldn't have to deal with this. People shouldn't have to deal with that. Well, in life, people do have to deal with that stuff. And if you're only focused on shoulds, you're not going to be prepared when bad things happen to you because you haven't thought about what you're going to do and how you're going to handle it. So here's some examples. In school, a lot of times, people are focused on microaggressions and safe spaces. These are built on the should statements. I shouldn't have to listen to that person because they'll make me feel bad. I shouldn't have to encounter this type of thought. I shouldn't have to encounter this scene in a book because it's really disturbing. I shouldn't have to do this. I shouldn't have to do that. People shouldn't have to encounter this. This is going to make you a weaker person because you're constantly trying to find ways to not deal with reality. Reality says that things in life are going to be very unpleasant, and you have to find ways to deal with them. And if you're focused on the shoulds, you're not focused on what is and what's in front of you and how you're going to deal with it. You just want to brush it off and go run away and hide so you don't have to deal with that stuff. So if you're constantly trying to avoid protesters or speeches or books or certain individuals, and you're either trying to cancel them or shout them down or trying to find a safe space away from them, that's going to lead you to be a weak person because you cannot handle those things. So you're trying to leave the situation. You have to be able to handle that stuff. Be a strong person. The 6th one is called blaming. This is when you attribute all the negative things in your life to somebody else. The way you feel is somebody else's fault. The way you acted, which was not good, is somebody else's fault. This alleviates you taking any responsibility in your life. It's my teacher that's failing me. It's my parents who are making me unhappy. It's always somebody else. You are responsible for yourself, and you are responsible for the things that you think and the ways that you feel. That's life. So if you're blaming people all the time, you are not focused on what's actually happening. You're focusing on the way you want it to be so that you can feel better about yourself. The last two are pretty quick. 7, mind reading. Okay, this is when you assume what other people are thinking. So if two people are having a conversation, they're kind of whispering, maybe they're looking in your direction, you just assume that they're talking crap about you. Or you tell yourself, oh, my teacher doesn't like me, that's why I'm failing. My teacher thinks this about me, because you constantly act terribly in their classroom. They might, but don't go around assuming how people think all the time. The last one, number 8, is called emotional reasoning. This is when you let your emotions decide and interpret reality. So your emotions are interpreting reality, not reason. You see this a lot when people say things like, this is my truth, my feelings determine my truth. Well, guess what? Your feelings can be wrong sometimes. Maybe the reality that you just thought happened didn't actually happen, and you are wrong in your interpretation of reality, therefore making your feelings wrong. Your feelings sometimes might not line up with facts. So your feelings might not be justified. Everyone thinks these days that their feelings are justified. That might not be the case. So those are the 8. These are called cognitive distortions because these are negative ways of thinking that can get you into a negative thought pattern, making you feel bad and making you distort how reality actually is, leading you to make bad decisions because reality is not what you think it is. This will lead you to become a more unpowerful person. So there are a couple things that you can do about that. The first is recognize the thought pattern. When you're having that thought pattern, even if you think it's justified, you got to mentally slap yourself in the face and tell yourself to knock it off, no matter how strongly you believe that it's correct. The second thing that you can do is give yourself a counter thought. So maybe they aren't talking about me. Maybe there's all these other things that they could be talking about. Okay, now I feel a little bit better. Maybe this group of people aren't so bad. Maybe I should go talk to somebody and figure out what they do think and why they think it. Maybe part of this situation is my fault. If it is my fault, how could my actions change the situation? Next, give people the benefit of the doubt. Don't just assume that all these people are going around with negative intentions all the time. Give people the benefit of the doubt. Don't assume negative things about people. Lastly, reject the us versus them mentality. Okay, you don't need to be on a team all the time. Be friends with everybody. Try to understand everybody. Have some intellectual humility. Maybe you're wrong. Maybe your feelings are wrong, okay? One thing that you should be careful of and note, so sometimes there are teachers and professors who will encourage you to look at situations this way. Okay, be wary of that because I see this going on a lot on campuses, especially the us versus them mentality. Okay, be careful. These are cognitive distortions. These are negative ways of thinking. I hope this helps.